All right, I guess we're live. Today we're gonna build a task tracker with capacity analysis because I've been having personal trouble doing this for myself. I've built a lot of task trackers over the years and have a semi-decent one in use now, but it doesn't do very much for capacity in terms of looking out at the future weeks, months, and knowing how busy I'm going to be. It's the kind of thing you need in order to be able to add projects, team projects, um, with any sense of like assurance you'll be able to complete it. So I think the kind of primary things we're going to try to do today are make like a tasks area that's just got some general. Um, actually, I think we'll use the sub items. So we'll try to get sub items going with like a roll up to the parent item, because I know that's a issue I've run into with sub items in their current iteration implementation. Um, I have like a morning, afternoon kind of. I don't really know why I'm talking about this stuff right now. I'll just build it and see how it goes. But in addition to that, we need to be able to check out our capacity, and that's like this sort of daily, weekly view, right? So it's like you need some way to scroll across weeks. And you can do that with columns, but I think it's a lot easier to have a row for each week and then group across the top in a board layout. But to do that, we've got to create rows in advance. And so there's something to solve there of like 3 months out maybe, and then have it like rolling window with an automation maybe to create those other ones. Um, Okay, I made some notes elsewhere, but let's just start with that because I mean I think the tasks part is pretty important. And I also want to start looking at some things like um, due date movements. So this can be a big problem when you're shuffling due dates around quite a bit. So I think I want to build like a um, task changes table that looks at the task and what was changed, mostly the due date and I think maybe duration. We'll start with that, and that'll give us a chance to look at how frequently these tasks are being changed. And I guess we'll need the status too, because we want to know. Um, we'll figure that part out. Anyway, okay. Let's add a backend because we need that. And I always find this little this person with the blindfold. Love that guy. And a settings page because I invariably need my modal lines formula. And this comes up sometimes, so I'll cover it now, but when you're looking at a modal, which is like the exploded version um, of a row, so when you click on a button to open the row up, uh, it's hard to show sort of visual separation between sections, and that's where this modal line formula comes in. So this is just it's hard to click on it. This is a rectangle formula that I cannot click on. There it is. And it's just looking up to these three different parameters. So the width, the height, and the color. And it makes this little, you can see what happens if you change the height to say 4. You get a thicker rectangle. If you do 40, you get much thicker. So, there's some ways to adjust what this looks like. But this 2 pixel, I'm going to say, height is usually enough. And so then the nice thing is you can just call that up from anywhere because that's a named formula. Okay, so if I say uh, and I have to say equals. Okay, and anywhere I do that, it's going to bring this in. So, I mean, you can use that in the canvas. You can kind of use it anywhere you want, and you can imagine you could do this a whole bunch of different ways. But for now, we'll park it, and we're going to make an ST for source table tasks, and make a new table, ST tasks. So I'm going to call this the name. Usually I call that the task. But in this case, and I'm going to do it this time again. I find it easier when I'm calling things up in formulas to be able to do that. It should be like task name, but it doesn't really matter. So I want a status. They have a preset one here that's not too bad, although I always like to change it. And I almost always, almost like immediately clear all the colors and then in progress blocked, and then convert it to a table, and we'll call that st task status and put it on its own page. Okay, nested underneath the task, and now we've got a lookup there where you'll see later that will come in handy. So tasks, we want a date, just a date for due date, and I think we want a duration. It's like how long do we think it's going to take? So this would be, let's say, estimated duration. And the other thing I want to add, I think at some point, would be a time tracking. Let's push this down and actually say up here, time tracking. And what does that look like? That looks like task push button to create a row. And then, and that'd be the start. And then push again to pause. And I'll just say stop. Then there would be a column in the task to look up to any time tracking. Okay, well, let's just make this now. Let's say st time task time tracking and make a table. Say st task time tracking, and we'll make this the task, which will be a lookup to the task. Single column, but we're going to create a column on the other side. Okay, now over in tasks, you can see time tracking here, which we'll see if we use that or not, but I tend to do it. Maybe we're going to move this out onto its own. So we've got the task. We need the person, which means we need a people table. And table st people, and the first one is Coda person, and then make that a people column. I'm going to turn the notifications off for now. Current user. And then we can pull out the name. Okay, so I think actually I'm going to make that the display column and push that back there. Okay, and now this always happens to me. Nickname. I always like to do this because then you can say Andy, and here this would be full name, And I'll make a new text column called name. Name. And we're going to say equals if nickname isn't blank, then nickname. Otherwise, we'll take full name, and we're going to split it. We're going to split it by a space, and then take whatever we get first. Okay, and what this does, it gives us Andy if we've got a nickname in here, and oops, I put the wrong one over there. I want that over there. Right? And then if I say that my nickname is, and I usually use this for my other profile guy, then it updates to that one. And if it's blank, then it'll just take whatever my first name is there. So that's fine. And then I'll add a new row for my other profile. Okay. And now that person comes in. I always got this one guy. And we're good there. So actually tasks, before we do very much, we need a responsible. All right, so this is people, st people lookup. And we're going to leave it alone. And I think we'll just call it responsible. All right, and I'm just going to set this to look up to, so now I need another setting. I need a setting for current person, and this is equals st people dot filter where coda person equals user. Okay, and we'll call this current person. And then this is like the equivalent of calling up user, but user is only going to call the coda person. This current person, when I call it, is going to call up the whoever the user is within the people table. Okay, and we'll do h3 current person. Okay, oh boy, I can't help myself. H3 and another line up there. Great, current person. So now in tasks, what I would do is say responsible. If nobody says anything, it's going to be the current. Hey, didn't I call that current person? I didn't. Current person. You have to name the formula so that you can call the formula. Edit value for new rows, formula, current person. Great. Oh, and it's still on. I want it to be the nickname. No, name as the display column. Great. Okay. Just rolling along here. Okay, so task time tracking. We want an st people, and we're just going to leave that open to be able to pull in whoever the person is who clicks the button in time in the task. And we want the date and time. This would be like start. Start date time, and I think we want another one for end date time. And why don't we leave it at that for now? So what's going to happen here in the task? And I don't know why I'm doing time tracking first, other than here we are. Checkbox is hmm, So this is tricky. So what we want to be able to do, I'm going to delete this for now, is to have a button. I'm going to build the button first and then come back to that checkbox because I think we're going to need it, but it's going to have to be a tricky per user one. So we'll figure that out after. So when someone comes along and clicks this button, it'll be a if st task time tracking dot filter where task, we want to see if in time tracking this one is in there and active. So if the task is this row and person equals current person, then something, otherwise something else. Okay, so I think what we want to do is say, see time tracking, start date time. So it's kind of like when you add the thing in, the first thing that will happen is we're going to add a task, a person, and a start date time. So let's do that one first. So we're going to say if filter task um, and start date time is not blank. No, I'm not going to do it that way. I'm going to say I need a checkbox in there to say it's active. All right, so let's go down here. We're going to say we're going to put the checkbox here. We're going to call it active. And the formula here will be if start date time is not blank and end date time is blank, then true, otherwise false. So if someone has put in a start date time, no, there will always be a start date time. So all we need is a if end date time is blank, then true or false. Okay. Right, because this, when we create the row over here, it's always going to add a start time. So and active. Okay. So this is if we go here and count it and it's greater than 0. And open this up a bit. So if we look in the time tracking and there's a row for this person and it's active, and there is more than 0 of those, then do something. So when the person clicks the button, what we want to do is modify rows. Actually, this is a better use case for a with name. So we're going to say with name to define this thing first, and we'll say active task. Okay, so now it's, I just have to get my formatting good here. So if active task dot count is greater than 0, so if we have an active task, then what we want to do is modify rows active task act who's not receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming. Why not? Let's just assume we're going to be okay. We're going to modify rows, active task row. We're going to modify the active. No, we're going to modify the end date time. And what we're going to do is put in now into there. Now, if there isn't a row, then we need to add one. We're going to add it to st_task time tracking, where task is this row, person is current person, and start date time is now. All right, so now what happens is I've got this task. The task is going to be make a video. And I should probably default the status to not started. Okay. Okay, so now when I click this, I've added a row to time tracking. It's active. And then hopefully when I click it again, because it's going to find this row, then it will just add the, and it added the end date time. And now if I go back and I click this again, yeah, it's going to make another row. Okay, now I've got another one. And when I click that again, there we go. It put the end time in again. So then what we want to do here is have a duration, I think. And we're just going to add a formula to say end date time minus start date time. Great. And actually, maybe so that I don't get an error, I'll do this only if end date time is not blank. Otherwise, nothing, right? Because then we're not getting a weird error without a date time there. Cool. Okay, so now we can track our time. And again, you could pull out here the related column to say duration and sum. And now we can see, pull out count selected. So it's like, that's probably not as useful. So I'm just going to get rid of that. I think what's really useful is being able to see how long we're spending on this task. So that's cool. So that means that now if someone else comes in, they can also click this button and it's going to add a new row, but with their person in here. So if I do that now, pretend I've just clicked from my other profile. Same time. Yep. Then back in here, when I click here, right, it's now added another row, and we actually have two active rows because we're both working at the same time. And then I can put in, well, guy finished, we'll say at like 2:30, and I just have to go back and say done. And now we know we've been working on that task for that long. So that's cool. I just need this button to say now, I'll take the same with name for the label, or say active task. And so it's like if uh, same thing, if active task dot count is greater than 0, then we want to say stop, and otherwise we'll say start. Oops. Uh-oh. Sometimes that happens when you don't have your brackets in place. So if active task dot count is greater than 0, then stop, otherwise start. Now we're done. Timer. Okay, and then it's start and stop. Cool. Turn off that ridiculous one row. I wish it would just default to that. And then I do, because I have a real problem, want to find a start. Go. Play. And another emoji. Yeah, emoji. Stop. And I take those and now go back to my label. Okay. This is actual duration timer. And maybe we want the ability to override that just in case. Sometimes you find duration, actual duration override. I'll say manual. Okay, and then one more column for duration, which is duration. We'll call it actual duration this time. And the formula will be if actual duration manual is not blank, then actual duration manual, otherwise actual duration timer. Okay, so then if I come in here and I'm like, nah, I messed up and it was actually an hour. It only measured this many. It's like I don't have to try to fudge one of these time trackings. I can just override it there. Great. So now we have a way to check the duration. And what I actually want to be able to do is say, okay, the due date for make a video is Wednesday, and I think it's going to take me 5 hours. So a couple of things. If I change this due date, I want to create a change log row. So let's call this tasks, st task change log. And we'll get to capacity. I think we're only at, I don't know, I can't really tell how long here. Oh my goodness, 39 minutes. Okay, well, this one will be 2 hours easily. And my headphones are going to die. So, st task change log. Let's make a table. We're going to call this st task change log. This will be the task. And we want the due date. No, just a date. We'll call it due date. We want a duration. We'll call it estimated duration. And right now, that's all we're changing, right? Or maybe we'll take the status as well. And this is the reason we want a separate status table, is because now we can look up and use that in places like this too. So I'm going to make this actually create column on the other side, right? So now And I guess a created on, and I think that's it. So we want an automation that says, let's see, say change. How are we going to do this? Uh, change log due date. Let's just do this one for now. And the description is, if a user changes the due date on a task, we add a row to task change log. Turn on. So when row changes in tasks, the column in this case is going to be due date. And we're going to say, what I'd really like to say is if, well, no, let's do it for every single one. So that means the very first time someone adds a due date, it's going to get added there. Right, so then what we need to do down here is add a row to st task changelog where task is step one result dot task. No, that is the task itself. Step one result is saying what did we just catch? What's the trigger? And that's the task that has changed. Step one result. The due date is step one result dot due date. The estimated duration is step one result dot estimated duration, and the status is step one result dot status. That's it. So let's try this out. So first of all, I think what I want to do is in due date here, we're going to try putting in value for new rows, not the date created, plus days one. Okay, so we're automatically going to drop in a due date of tomorrow. All right, so I added that row. Now, what I'm curious is, will that on its own trigger the automation? Because I haven't put anything else in, and when someone's creating a task, they would not have put anything else in. So let's go over here to task change log. It did. Okay, well, I guess I'm not really worried about that. That just defines when the task was created, I guess. All right, so if it was first, then that's when it was created. Okay, so there we go. Now I'm going to come back in and let's say this is call my uh, friend. No, call my like lawyer. That's something that I don't always want to do. And so, I've created this, and let's say I'm like, I really don't want to do it Tuesday. I'm just gonna push it out to Wednesday. Then now what we should be doing is tracking that. We should get another task change appearing here. This is when you, there we go. It's like this is when you decide whether or not to go look at your automation log. All right, so now we know. Oh, and I should have done the person too. I wonder if, I wonder how I do that. So let's say it was because the automation bot. I can't say let's say modified by, I'm going to make this a people, st people. I'm going to fill the values with st people dot filter where coda person equals this row dot modified by. Okay, so that's like who was the last person to modify this. Because now if I go back to task change, I should be able to say st people, and we'll call this modifier or modified by. Okay, and these ones should both be me. But if we do it again and I update, and now I have to update the automation because we also want to push into here. Excuse me, modified by will be step one dot modified. What did I call that? St people. Is that right? Yeah. Modified by. Last modified by. Okay. So now if I go in, now I'm like, no, I really, really don't want to do this. So I'm going to push to Thursday. And now that rule should trigger again. And it automatically dropped in who modified it. So that's good. And let's actually put in like 1 hour, 1 hour, 1 hour. Oh, why doesn't it like that? Oh. And while we're at it, let's make the estimated duration of this 1 hour. Okay, so now we have a way to track when these things are changing. And so I think, not that, this. The only other thing we want to do is set a threshold and say, if you changed a task, it's not just one, because I should have probably started with this. The whole point is like, if you're moving your task due dates around a lot, it means you're spending a whole bunch of time that you could be spending on work, instead just like shuffling dates. And you probably either need to estimate better or just forget it and kind of do your work and stop moving things around. But regardless, it's like at some point you need to get notified that you're doing this because you probably don't notice it. You probably don't know it's a bad habit. And so the question is, do you get notified when a single task has been changed 3 times in a given space of time? Like how many times in a space of time? So let's try that actually. So let's say um, due date change notification settings. And so this would be number of tasks changed time period. I'll make a little text column here and call this number tasks changed. I don't know whether to make it personal or collaborative. I almost think collaborative, but yeah. Because if it's personal, then you can set your own notifications. Okay, so number of tasks changed in time period. Let's just say 1. So if we changed 1 task, um, number of changes allowed in time period. This would be another text box. We'll call it number changes allowed. What do we call this one? Number changes allowed. And then let's do a within time period. And this one will do a duration. Time range? No, how do we do this? I think it's got to be a text period, a text again. Uh, number of days. Number of days changes. That isn't very good, but at least we're going to identify it. So number days changes. So now it would say if you change one task 3 times within this time period, if we change this, we'd be like, if you change 2 tasks, each number changes per task allowed in the time. So if you change 2 tasks 3 times each within your time period of 1 day, then you're going to get a notification. And so how are we going to identify this? I guess it would be on people, right? So we want to take the task change log modified by, we're going to push this column over to people. Now we have the task change log here. Let's make a checkbox. We'll say due date notification, due date change, due date exceeded change. No, I'm just gonna say due date change. Due date change too many times. stop, stop belaboring it. Add a formula. So we're gonna say if we have 3 parameters, right? The number of tasks. Let's go back and take a look. We've got the number of tasks. So number tasks. Oh, that's funny. Num tasks in with num due date changes in num period. Let's go back to people and we'll say edit formula. If, I'm just going to comment this out so I can put it here. If task change log filter where task equals current value dot count is greater than number of tasks changed. Nope. Number of tasks with number of date changes in the number period. All right, let's go back here. So if this column has, oh, you gotta pause the stream.